there's probably one thing I would tell myself or I wish I knew in college. It's sort of an interesting thing. I think a lot of people who, end up at companies like LinkedIn in technology are some of the smartest people they've ever known. Right. And like, that was what I remember of myself. Like when I was in high school, like I used to think I was like, I was something else. Right. And I'm like, oh, I'm smart. Like I got this. And when I went to college, I was like, I'm pretty smart. I got this. Right. And like, I remember, feeling like I was coasting through college. And then I hit the workplace and I realized I was nothing. And it took me a while actually to come to that realization. The mentor, one of my managers, one time, okay, I'm going to tell a quick story.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So at my last company, we used to, it was like, in the 2000, like early 2000, I started in 2000. So like the early 2000s, it was still sort of like right before the dot-com bubble burst. And, company cultures were still sort of a little bit like tech company culture was still a little bit of the, like, the silliness that you hear about sometimes. And we used to have these tricycles, like these industrial strength tricycles that we'd ride. And the edges of our cubes had removable sort of end caps that were plasticky that we'd use as like a lance, and essentially have like jousting tournaments on tricycles. And one time I was bored. I'd been asked to work on this really important thing. I was bored, and I was like, kind of like had hit this like mental block. And so I was on my tricycle, just like riding around in a figure eight in the middle of the hallway. And my manager comes to me and she pulls me aside and she's like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And I'm like, sure. I go into her office and she says, Mohak, what are you doing? And I was like, is this a trick question? It's pretty obvious. I was riding my tricycle. She's like, no, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, look, you've got this like really important thing you're working on. Like, what's going on with it? I'm like, look, I kind of hit a mental block. I needed a break. And she's like, you can't be doing that. I'm like, why? She says, look outside. Everybody out there is like smarter than you. Everybody out there is working harder than you. Like everybody out there has the same education or better. And like, they're hungry. You've got this thing that's the most important project we're working on, and you're goofing around. Like, that's just not going to cut it. That's not that's not how you succeed. You can't coast through on smarts anymore. And it was this like mind-blowing realization for me where I was like, oh yeah, good point. And I feel like, early in my career, I sort of started with the assumption that like smarts were enough, and they just aren't. They never were. Like and like to your point about Elon, like it isn't enough that he just has these like brainstorm ideas. Like the dude is just, I mean, honestly, when does he sleep?
I
Right?
know.
Like he's CEO of two companies, and in the background, he's like trying to like disrupt human intelligence. Like it's amazing, right? And like that takes incredibly hard work. Anything worth doing, it takes a ton of effort and dedication and passion. And I would tell myself that.